Hello everyone and welcome back. So what you're seeing right now might look a little unfamiliar if you've been following up to this point. These blue parts here is going to be the next thing that we're going to be tackling. And the reason I sort of have it loosely blocked out right now is just because now that we're moving on to the guts and the core of everything here, it's becoming a lot trickier to sort of tell exactly what's going on. So what I decided to do before recording this is kind of break this down into very primitive shapes, but just to sort of have a good idea as to how everything's laid out. What I did was gather more reference, but also sort of dissect the existing reference we have here. And this is being a little laggy right now, but just sort of creating this sort of master sheet of everything I could find for these specific pieces and how they're sort of attached down. This was also a time where it was very useful to go back to this guy. I know he's sort of been taboo to sort of look at because we know he's not completely accurate. But with all the reference, like there's no way to see anything that's going on inside of there. So to sort of be able to poke a camera in here, and even if this is a gross simplification, and who knows, maybe it's 100% accurate, but even if it is a simplification, it's something to work off of, right? And on top of that, if all the reference images I found cannot show what's going on inside of there, it's a pretty good indication that whoever's looking at our final result isn't going to be able to get a good look in there as well. And obviously this 3D scan, even though it's been good for some things, not so much for this. Yeah, so we can put that aside, and sort of using all the reference images we had, I just sort of blocked things out, like I said, super simplified. Like this is obviously representing like this guy here, but the point of me doing it this way was just to sort of have a sense of scale and where things are laid out, like how far forward are things, where are things anchored to, how are they attached. So now that I know all these pieces actually do fit and work together, we can start to go through and replace them. And what I really recommend before diving into this part is doing something similar. Like you can use this video as reference as well, just to sort of have an idea as to how everything is laid out. But I also am, of course, providing this reference. And on top of that, the 3D models that I was looking at before, you guys should have links to those as well. So yeah, what I want to do in this part is just sort of go through and replace these one by one. And the good thing is that these are almost identical symmetrically, except for like a couple little things. So once we have one done, it shouldn't take too much time to sort of mirror that guy over. And on top of that, once I did fill this up, I started to realize that this piece takes up much more of the interior than I thought. Like if we start to look at something like this, the only things we're really missing after this is this sort of back plate, the keys obviously, and with the keys come these big parts. So then it's just stuff in the back that once again we don't really have the best view on. Oh, this is actually a really good view of that thing we were looking at last time, so we'll have to revisit that. But we'll save the back and the keyboard for the end. But honestly, like breaking it down, and once I've filled this in, I'm starting to be like, okay, we're actually filling this up a lot faster than I thought. I'd say in about maybe 1, 2, 3 more parts, we're going to be most of the way there. I'm not going to say that's how long it's going to take to finish it, but we're definitely getting along pretty far. So let's go ahead and start replacing some of these pieces. I'm going to go back to this sheet here. I'm going to base it on this design. And one thing maybe before we dive into it is I kind of noticed that our frame is a bit tall. If we look at a lot of the frames, they're more rectangular, and it kind of seems like ours is a bit higher up in general. So I want to show you guys a trick, and maybe we don't decide to do this, but it's definitely an option. If we select everything and then have our mouse off of any of the components and we go to, say, vertex, we can select vertices across multiple objects at the same time. So this is pretty useful. I can go into a side view by pressing spacebar and say like go here. And let's say we just select down to like here or so. I just want to be able to bring the top down without affecting anything on the bottom. And of course this is going to lag quite a bit. I do want to deselect some things though. I want to deselect this since it's sort of rooted to the bottom. And like I said, everything is going to take a little bit of time because we're dealing with a lot of stuff at once. I'm going to deselect this as well. Pretty happy with the positioning on these after sort of messing around with it. But everything else, if I go back to my main view, we should be able to push down just a little bit. Nothing too crazy, just because if I go back to this, I notice there isn't that much space here, or rather too much space here, but it seems to be quite a bit longer here. So now that we have all this selected, it's going to lag, but I can push that down a little bit and let's see how that affects everything. It'll take about a second to refresh. I'm just making sure that's not messing anything up. It shouldn't. I want to do just a little bit more again. And see if that's something I like. Yeah, it definitely seems more compact. I'm just going to bring some reference in to sort of get a feel for that, and this definitely seems to be much more appropriate spacing wise. So I'm happy with that. Let's get out of that. It's a bit more snug, but I'm confident with our layout right now. So yeah, let's go and with that taken care of, start making this disc guy. Should be pretty simple. It's not a very complex shape, just a lot of extrusions. We've done similar things in the past. We can also see the bottom of it here. The bottom seems to be flat. It has this sort of ring, flattens out. So I'll have both of these in frame, like so. But I'm going to be working off of these placements. Like I said, you should probably do something similar where you lay everything out first. So I'm just going to change the color on this so I know where I am in the process. The roundness I'm okay with. I can definitely afford to be a bit more actually, since I have control. Well, things are obviously a bit messed up, but I don't think it's impossible to fix. I'm just going to snap these verts to the top of this side since they should be even. Yeah, sometimes when you go ahead and sort of change the segments on something after moving it around quite a bit, Maya doesn't like that very much. So we have that. Let's start carving out some of these shapes. So, in general, and just by looking at some reference on another screen, this kind of seems to be like in a cup. This kind of shows it. But it seems like the bottom is like a cup and then it's like plopped in there and there's like these knobs and stuff on the cup. Like this knob goes into there and this is kind of resting in it. So how I'm going to approach this is by, first of all, hollowing this out. Pretty easy. We can just select these guys with a shift period to grow selection. And then I can deselect that so we can extrude this in a little bit, and extrude that down again so we can hollow it out. We don't want this part to be as tall, but I'm going to leave it like that for now. What I'm going to do is grab these faces. We can use our good pal, the Smart Duplicate face, raise them up. Of course, we can extrude this guy, so just pulling up with shift and making sure these faces have their normals in the correct direction. I'm going to move the pivot to the bottom so I can snap it down there and just sort of stick it back in there pretty comfortably and give it a general shrink all the way around. So I'm going to want these vertices to be at the top of how I had it set up before, so that we can then take these faces and lower them a bit. Sort of how we see it more in some of the references similar to that. Okay. So this guy, all he really needs is a knob sticking out of it, like right here, and he's going to be done. So I'm going to let him be for now, and we're going to focus on this inner piece. Just a series of extrusions, it seems like, so it should be pretty basic. I'm going to hit Control-Shift-X to get our cut tool. Actually, maybe not. I'm going to select these middle faces again, hit Control-E. I'm going to try and make this ring right now. So I'm just insetting a little bit. And now we can select this ring, bevel it, and that gives us sort of a face ring to extrude up from. And actually, rather than using Shift and drag, I'm actually going to hit Control-E so I can turn the thickness up, and then with offset, I can taper it in a little bit. I'm going to do like a 0.01, 0.1, that might be too much, 0.075, still too much, 0.05. Okay, that's more like it. Lower that a little bit. And now we have that ring set. We're going to have to do it again in the middle. So let's get this selection. And push this in again. Of course, we're going to have to bevel this guy so we can get some faces to work with. Make this 0.75, sorry, 0.075. 0.05. Going to hit Control-E, get a bit of thickness on there, and then offset, yeah, 0.05 or something small. So that'll do the trick. This we can actually use a Boolean for, something we should all be very familiar with at this point. So let's set that up. It looks like it's sort of extruded up and then cut out. So yeah, the ring in the middle we don't have to do a Boolean for because that's a very simple extrusion job. I'm not going to actually puncture all the way through. For this guy, as you'll see, is I'll extrude this in and just drop it low. When we bake this down, it's going to pretty much be a hole. So I'll even taper it in like that. So that sort of gets the whole part done. We still need this ring, this sort of lip around it, which, just like before, can just extrude up, offset 0.05, just way too much, 0.01. And I can even go ahead and delete that ring, why not? Cool. So that's that. You can see if I smooth that out. Sorry if you can hear my downstairs neighbors, by the way. They've been having like crazy gamer rage for like quite a while. So if they're screaming in the background, it's nothing serious. This is definitely way too small. Cool. Let's get these guys now. Very simple. Kind of just looks like some rounded cubes. With something sticking through. Simple enough. Let's start with a cube. I'm just going to snap it to this vertice. And just sort of mimic that shape very loosely. Kind of seems like this extends out to the end almost. Not really, it seems like it's like halfway and then something pulls out to the end. So I'm not going to make it that far. It seems to scale down a little bit. And regardless, both ends are definitely rounded. So I just beveled those to get this shape. And then from here, I'm just going to move the pivot to the center. There's 5, so we can do some quick math here. Let me get my calculator. It's being a bit slow right now, but if we do 360 divided by 5, 72. So we have to duplicate this and rotate it around this point 72 degrees to get it to be sort of a perfect rotation. So let's try that out. So I hit Control D to duplicate. Can rotate this 72. Duplicate that 72. Duplicate that 72 and duplicate that 72. Sweet. We of course could have used edit and duplicate special and put that value in, but the reason I did it this way is because typically something messes up when you have to undo and redo it, and this was so small it's like you might as well just manually do it. It'll probably take the exact same amount of time. I'm going to scale this out a bit. Then I also want to do that trick that we've done before, where we change our move tools to normal, and with vertices selected, we can beef it out a little bit. And that should do the trick. I'm going to put this back on world. And we can do our Boolean. So freeze transform, delete history on both these guys. Get our Boolean, select our main, shift select our cutting object. And I'm just going to select this and push it in a bit deeper. Cleanup, delete history and base objects. And that's our cut. Pretty clean, pretty simple. Looking at this reference now, I kind of want to bring these guys in a little bit. And push these out a bit. We might as well exaggerate them a little bit, just because when we soften it in Zbrush, it'll be way smaller and more simplified down. So that's cool like that. They do have these tabs sticking out. I don't think those are too important. But they only take about 2 seconds to make, so I might as well throw them in. The way I'm going to make these is simply by starting with the cube. And just by sort of positioning it here, I can skinny it out. I can have it resting at the bottom. I don't mind if it goes through the mesh a little bit, because it's all going to be softened down at such a small detail. But I'm going to pull this guy up. I'm going to extrude it when it's near the top, like so, and then extrude this again. Of course, it goes without saying that this is all going to be baked down. This is way too small to actually use geometry for it, but I'm just going to bevel the ends. And then I'm even going to fatten up these faces here. So it's more like this rounded tab sticking out. Let's give these guys a color so we remember they're there. Just gonna widen the whole thing up. Cool. Yeah, we can just sort of do what we did before In fact, this would probably be a good time to just do the smart duplicate. So I'm going to go to Edit, Duplicate Special. We don't want it to translate at all. We don't want it to scale. We want it to rotate along Y, that would be. So it goes X, Y, Z. So Y, we want it to be 72. We want it to have 5 copies. And if we hit apply, yeah, it should rotate around that point. We might have so we only needed 4 copies. So since we made 5, it put another one directly on top. But that's how you do it that way. Let's combine these guys. So that's looking pretty good. The bottom part, yeah, so this would be nice. To have that sort of separation in there. We need to make this little nub. This is good though, because we can just sort of borrow pieces. Like we've been working on this for a while. We definitely have a library of things we can just sort of take from. So if I center pivot on this, I don't want to, actually I do want to freeze transform delete history. I was hoping that it would have the rotation value on it so I could just sort of get it perfectly leveled out. But if we go into our side view, we can get a pretty good approximation. It's going to sort of line it up with an edge. Like it's, yeah, that's pretty much level. So let's get back. Let's stick this guy approximately where we see it. Definitely have to scale it up. Seems to be positioned right about here. And I'm going to isolate these two guys because I'm actually going to want to weld it on directly. We've gone over quite a few different ways to weld. One way we could just Boolean it. Into a Boolean union, which I think sounds the most appealing right now. So I'm going to try that. Freeze transforms and history on these two guys. Get our Booleans. Select the two. Go to union. New Boolean operation. Delete history and base objects. And now if we check the other side, yep, it should be cut out perfectly. Just going to anchor this down a bit more so it's a bit more stable. Yeah, and that's that little nub. Got that guy on pretty quick. This whole top piece seems to be done. Mine is this. So what this is say we look at this reference, it's kind of what's faceting in this ribbon, which we'll get to when we tackle this sort of back plate, which I think that'll be the next thing that we do. But yeah, that back plate sort of houses this sort of ribbon that these wheels are turning. Not entirely sure the actual purpose of these, but that's what's going on. And I wasn't really able to find any reference of exactly how they're pinned down, but that's where this 3D model came in. It sort of has these weird contraptions where this actually opens up, it's faceted in there, it's going through. So I'm going to take inspiration from this idea. It's also sort of clamped in from the bottom. So we'll be going off of that idea just because, like I said, it's such a small detail that people won't even notice if it's inaccurate. And that's literally the only lead I have. Like there's no reference image I can find that's actually showing how that is exactly done. So let's go ahead with that. Yeah, just because as much as I'd like this to be 100% accurate, I'm no typewriter expert. There is limitations to what I can and can't do. And one of the things I can't do is have access to a typewriter right now where I see inside. So I'm going to delete some faces. Going to delete that. And it seems to carry the belt through to about here. What I'm going to do is now isolate this because we have a little bit of cleanup to do. Delete these faces as well. And we're going to have to bridge these down. And fill hole. I'm just wondering if this is going to cause any issues being kind of tapered in like that. But I mean, as long as a belt feeds through there, it doesn't necessarily matter, right? That should be fine. Unless I can think of, like, maybe if I add a cut like this and level that out, add a cut like this, and by leveling I'm just vertex snapping it up. I could extrude through. Let me try this. Yeah, if I grab these edges, I could extrude up, snap it here. Yeah, and merge those. That works. So now I can just select all these edges without the side ones, bridge, and it gets the same effect. This time it's not tapered, so we can snap these guys in. Yeah, so there's always a different way to sort of do something. And even though it's so minute, I just like it because it has a much clearer breakup between these two. Nice. Very nice. Let's go ahead and save since we haven't done that yet, this part. Okay, and we can move on. So, I'm trying to think of the next main thing. Probably this piece that's anchoring the whole thing down would probably be a good idea to get into place. I'm just looking at references and I'm trying to find, like, here it is right here, and you can see it's attached. So I think it is like these are one piece of metal down to this. I think this is all one. I might be wrong about these two in the front because they're also attached to this. See how this one's put together. Like, this person views it as one piece as well. So we can go ahead and try and do that. For this sake then, just to make sure we can keep tabs on all of that, I'm going to make them yellow. Yeah, yellow's gonna stand out quite a lot. So what I'm going to do is start piece by piece. I'm trying to think if I should weld these two together. These two pieces here, they must be welded together unless there's a big bolt going through. Which honestly kind of sounds like a good design choice. I don't know how accurate that is though. What do you know? Right there. There's the big bolt. Okay, so we're going to bolt it down, which is nice, which means we're not going to have to weld these two pieces together. These are a different story though. We are going to have to combine these. This is also attached, so I need to make this yellow and this. So the yellow pieces have to be put together into one cohesive just sort of metal piece. I feel like I'm overcomplicating it in my head. But I want to make sure I get this right because I know this is going to be important. This one seems to dip in a little bit, and I always like that kind of visual interest by having no super straight pieces for too long. So I'm gonna add an edge there, so I can add a second edge. And select all these verts, and what I can do is scale them in. So we have this sort of transition. This cylinder seems too cylindrical. This seems more, yeah, and same with the 3D model, seems more like a very rounded rectangle. It's much more like this, which I could probably work with. But I think I should just replace it with a rectangle altogether. So I think I'm going to do that. Let's borrow one from down here, rotate it. Just going to snap it down to be level. Kind of line it up. And snap it to the top. Yeah, so I want it to be more of like a skinny, let's center the pivot on this actually. A skinny, yet rounded rectangle. So if I delete this, it's more like this shape. I still kind of want to bulge it out a bit, so I added an edge loop there, so I can pull out from. I guess I need to add one on the other end. Yeah, just to round it a bit more. So let's isolate this guy and see what's going on. Oh, it didn't cut through the top. That makes sense. We can even calm that down by beveling it. And this is more the shape I'm going for. Okay, let's get all these pieces attached. Let's start with these two. Let's connect these guys up. This one should be pretty straightforward. We essentially just have to scale this in. Add some cuts in so that we can delete the faces where they're intersecting. Or to keep it even easier, we can just do our Boolean like before. Let's select both these guys, do a union, new Boolean operation, clean up, delete history and base objects. I am going to keep these edges in though. Actually, no, I'm not. I'm going to delete these edges that we made. No, I'm not. I'm going to keep them. There was a reason for it. Because I wanted to snap these to something. Can raise this one up a little bit. Merge those verts. Let's just sort of give these some more edges just so that they don't have too many loose vertices. We're gonna have to add our screw in here, so we can do a Boolean to cut through this as well. I'm just gonna select this face, save us a bit of time since this isn't anything new, and just spawn a sphere directly, or a cylinder directly on top. Let's do it how we normally do it, where I select, shift select, and make sure this is on difference, new Boolean operation, delete history and base objects. Very quick and easy. Can pull that down a bit more. And let's find a screw. This guy is already lined up. Give it a bit of a random rotation. Nice. I'm kind of feeling like this is a bit tall. So I'm going to pull that down a bit. Just looking at the reference here. Yeah, it's feeling much better. Let's see, what is next? What is next? We're gonna have to attach this piece on. So this piece is kind of just like a holder for this. Obviously this cylinder is a very crude representation of it. But we can still use the cylinder as it is. And I'm kind of glad that this is all lined up here. So what I'm gonna do is isolate these guys. I'm going to use this cylinder to snap to the middle because we want it to be like surrounding it. Let's select these verts and snap them to the top, snap them to the bottom. We can sort of have this connecting in as well. Scale seems to be a bit much, so I want to pull it in. But if I extrude it, that's obviously a really bad example. Let's go ahead and actually, no, I was going to say delete every other edge, but that's a bit much. I'm thinking of the best ways to do this. So I'm extruding this out, and if I change my scale tool to component and I make this wider, does that look good? Just sort of stick it in like that. And what if I round this out? So I'm going to experiment with this for a second. Let's isolate this object and clean this up so it's reasonable to work with. Merge those. We can clean this up here as well. And on the bottom, okay, that's much better. So if I select these guys, I can kind of like add an edge loop here, rotate, scale, and kind of pull it in like an arm, if that makes sense. Something along these lines. And of course we can play with the position of these a bit more. Might want to tuck these in a bit. Yeah, so I'm happy with that sort of arm sticking out. I just want to make sure, actually, yeah, I'm going to want to, it seems a bit much. I'm going to raise it like that. And let's see if on the bottom, we have something very similar. So I'm going to duplicate this down so we have something to work with when we get down there. Let's try and find a way to combine all of this, because this is a pretty complex area as it is. I think the first thing I'm going to have to do is line this up here. Or maybe not. Let's just find some place that we can anchor it. I'm going to put it here. And then these guys, we need to sort of find a place that it can naturally attach to, like right here. Which means I'm going to have to soften this out a little bit. Yeah, so this should make it a bit easier to work with. So now all we have to do is just sort of add some cuts so we can sort of weld everything together. Should probably start from this side. Cut, 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 and end it there. So now if I delete these faces, and if this has a face on the inside, we'll have to delete that. Yep. We can start to sort of combine these guys just by manually lining all this up. I'm going to snap these to the top just for now. And we'll have to make some cuts on this one as well. Just because we can't afford to snap these guys off to the side, because then it'll get rid of it being round, right? So we have to compromise with this piece. Top should be fine. Mesh, combine. Merge the vertices. Cool. Let's do the same for the bottom. So I'm just moving the pivot here so that I can snap it to the top. Delete this other one. And yeah, we're just going to have to attach it like we did before. So I'm going to isolate these two pieces. Let's add in some edges here. Snap them to the height of the piece we're trying to attach. Going to delete this back face if we're trying to combine them. Snap this here. Yeah, we're gonna have to pull these guys forward and snap them into position as well. Just like we did before. Select these faces back here and delete them. And and cut out some places for these to stitch to. Can delete that. Snap that. It should all be good now. Mesh, combine, merge. And that acts as that piece pretty good. This bottom part is where it's going to get more organic, but that's okay. Before we get to that, let's clean up these extra edges that we really don't need. So I'm just going to grab the extras here and snap them down. Snap these ones down. Should be able to merge these. No problem. I'm wondering if this is going to give us a shading error. If we auto smooth that. It might, but I'm going to leave it for now. It's very, very minimal. You can see there's like some sort of weird hardness there. But we'll see. I'm gonna let it slide for now. It might come back to bite us in the butt, but right now I don't think it's that big of a deal. Snap these ones up. Merge those guys. Should be good. Just auto smooth it. Nice. Yeah, the blue parts that are left should all be the most easy. So we're definitely getting the challenging stuff out of the way, which is good. I'm just hitting things with auto smooth so they look a little bit better. Didn't get this top ring. I don't know how I missed this. Yeah, like something like that is going to cause weird rendering issues, I'm guessing. You don't want two edges stretched like that really close to each other. It's usually a very bad thing. So I'm gonna see if I can, yeah, snap it down there. And same with this one. Snap it down there. Cool. This part, once again, we can't really see because all the reference is kind of being blocked. So I'm going to kind of just loosely base it off of this 3D model I found online. And the way that they sort of perceive it is kind of like one part wedges out so that the cylinders can go down, and another part branches off so the other cylinder can go through. And that's seems like quite a simplification of how it probably is. But nevertheless, that's the shape that it is in one way or another. So I'm going to give this a bit more space. I kind of like the idea of this tapering down a little bit. And I'm going to want it to be round, but I think I'll leave that for Zbrush. one thing I can do, just because like if I bevel these edges, like merging all this is going to be a nightmare. One way we can do it though is by adding a cut in the middle, because I want it to be a little bit rounded, right? And doing it this way. Change this back to world. Because if we do it this way, we're keeping this initial shape, and we can even bevel that so it's a bit soft. So if we're going to do that, we might as well push this a bit more to the extreme. Yeah, and then Zbrush will easily take care of the rest of that. So we're going to have to sort of connect all of this. What's going on here? Oh, it's just a different piece sticking through. I think before we attach these two, we should have these two pieces together. So I'm going to undo that. I'm going to scale this down, put it back to how it was. But yeah, let's add an edge loop to this object and extrude down rather than giving this shape the opportunity to sort of like merge in. It just takes too long. So we'll extrude that down. The way that the person who made this 3D model has it interpreted is a bit more organic, where it's pulling out like so. Has a bit of a roundness to it. It's also round at the bottom. Which, yeah, anytime I sort of have a pipe going through something, I like it to be rounded off at the bottom. I do want this to stay flat while this is going through. I think it's important to have that consistency. If a shape is puncturing through something, it should be consistent through the entire puncture. So I'm going to flatten that out. Soften it just a little bit more. Okay, let's isolate this because we're going to want to clean it up a bit. First of all, we have a tube that's cutting through this, so I want to make this closed off so we have as much surface space to work with. Merge verts on that. And let's just continue this all the way around. I'm just holding shift and dragging along the edge so I can make sure it's perfectly at 50 degrees. I'm going to do the same all the way down here. Closing off that edge at the top kind of screwed over our abilities to fully just hold shift and get like an edge loop through. So, I mean, this doesn't take too long. Okay, so now can sort of give this a bit of roundness. Okay, and that works. It's not perfect. I'm gonna round that out a little bit as well. It's definitely not perfect. But this is why I like Zbrush, it'll make up for that. Auto smooth seems to like it. Got no really crazy shading going on. Could probably even afford to pull this in. So yeah, I'm going to go ahead and combine these two now. It should be pretty straightforward. I'm tempted to just widen it a little bit just so it perfectly fits. Yeah, that seems to work with everything else. I'm going to go ahead and do that. And that means all we really have to do for this part is take these verts, drop them a little bit inside, and we can do a freeze, transform, delete history, new Boolean union. Delete history and base objects. Just gonna add some edges. And then, yeah, we're gonna have to remerge these simply because they went through a little bit, so they never went to a fine point. And just sort of trace the whole thing and make sure there's no weird floating vertices. Like here, like they're tiny. If possible, keep the cylinder vertices intact and the ones underneath you can snap to it, just so the roundness stays consistent all the way up. Okay, that seems to be good. Merge vertices. Yeah, and that's that part complete. These cylinders should all be, I mean, pretty straightforward. We still have this part. Let's get the cylinders done first, though. We deserve a nice little easier one to do, but let's go ahead and save really quick since we haven't done that in a bit. All right, and we'll keep going. Yeah, as far as the cylinders go, I'm looking at that 3D model. And it's not giving us a ton to go off of here. Should probably pull it in screen. But yeah, just like some metal tubes, some connection pieces. We can just kind of get creative with it, but essentially it seems to have some sort of gear mechanic very similar to this one on the outside, which we can trust because we know that this exists. So we know that we're using something along these lines. So yeah, let's follow these blueprints. The small one's probably going to be a lot easier to get through. So the cylinder itself, I'm just going to, straight up keep the way that it is. Maybe scale it in a little bit. I do want it to be connecting into something, and this is going to be a good opportunity for us to give it some more believability by having it connecting into this guy here. So what we can do is move the pivot to the top, snap it up there, scale it up like so. I'm sure you can see where I'm going with this. It's just sort of like an anchor point, something that's attached. I'm going to grow it a little bit more so that I can pluck it through. New Boolean union, delete history and base objects. And now that's attached. So it's going to be really nice in Zbrush. For us, we're going to be able to have a nice smooth transition between those two. I'm going to select all these. Going to extrude and then scale that in like so. And extrude that up. So now, yeah, if we soften this, it's actually going into something. Let's make sure we're keeping track of things with our colors. This is technically also done. This bottom piece, we're just gonna have to cap off with something. Which is also reminding me we're gonna have to cut a hole through these. So we'll have to get to that in just a moment. I think I can just add a screw to the bottom. I think that would probably do. But yeah, we're gonna have to use this as somewhat of a Boolean mesh. So I'm going to Control D this, Shift click our main, get this in here. I'm going to drag this down, freeze transforms, delete history, and make sure this is on difference, new Boolean operation, delete history and base objects. Yep, so it cuts through. Just gonna have to fill this up. Sorry, we're gonna have to bridge. Interesting, it says there isn't the same amount of edges, so let's see where it's gone wrong. Just going all the way around. I'm just hitting G to repeat last command. So I can just select the edges, press G. We'll clean that up in just a little bit. Well, it seems like the same amount of edges to me, so I'm not quite sure why it's giving us that error. But at least we found out that there's some weird small edges going on. Snap those into place. Merge verts. And yeah, looks like a similar story on the bottom here. Please, nope. Okay, we're gonna have to manually bridge these as well. Okay. Just simplify these as well. Merge that all up. Sweet, so that's cut through. Kind of want to skinny this out a little bit. Yeah, and then on the bottom, I can just sort of like, yeah, take one of these guys. No one's ever going to see under there, but it just needs to kind of make sense, just in case someone does. The bottom of this thing, I've been thinking about that quite a bit recently. I don't know how intense I want to go into modeling the bottom of it, because I'm never going to display the bottom. But we'll see once we get to the typewriter's keyboard. I think that'll kind of be the deciding factor on that. Okay, so we got that guy in place. I say that's a pretty solid halfway point, because we still have this connection, this main pipe, which is really simple, these pieces, and this, and then we mirror it over and make a few small changes. I think that's a pretty good place to stop. I'm going to go ahead and call it a part there. I really like being able to look down and start to see things in here. And by the next part, we'll have this totally done. Like, I'm very confident we'll have that done in the next part. From there, we're going to get that sort of backplate in, and then things are like really starting to look almost at the finished stage. So we're really getting there. I'm really happy with how this is turning out too. I was really worried about getting these inner pieces sort of lined up. That being said, this is the easy part. There's some very complicated pieces, mostly in the back, that I'm not too sure about, but we'll get those working, and we'll get it to be right. Especially we can revisit this guy now that we know we have reference. But yeah, thank you guys for watching this part, and I'll see you in the next one where we finish this off. All right, take it easy, guys.